I am at a loss. My whole world has turned upside down. I am lost. I don't know what to do. Father Patrick tells me it was the devil trying to lead me astray. No matter where I turn, there are no answers. Have faith, my child, he had said. My friend, my mentor, Mother Bernadine, passed away 3 days ago. Let me explain why her death hit me so hard and has forevermore impacted my life. I was, of course, devastated by her passing, but that's not what threw my existence into turmoil. After all, she was 93 years old and she wasn't very well, so her death had not been unexpected. Still, I felt her death profoundly. I had known Mother Bernadine since I was a teen. She had given a speech on compassion and forgiveness during religious studies at my school. I was so touched and moved by her words, her demeanour, that I had found my way to the convent and asked if I could help out in some small way after school. Mother Bernadine had taken me under her wing and offered some stability in my chaotic young life. I was looking for something good and I had found it. Sometimes, when I looked into her eyes, I swear I could see the light of the Holy Ghost. The laugh lines on her face told me a story of a woman that laughed often, loved, lost, and yet persevered. She was imbued with a love for all mankind, and not a day passed that she didn't show some kindness, be it a word or a deed. She was a beacon of light in a sometimes dark world. She often took me to the light when everything in my world seemed bleak and hopeless. She always managed to show me the beauty around me, the good in people, the good in life. When she had fallen ill that last time, there had been whispers, weeks before her death, in the corridors of the convent, the church, and even in the Vatican, that she would be canonized, if it could be proven, among other things, that she had performed 3 miracles. I had thought at the time, and always thought, 3 miracles was excessive. I mean, couldn't saints come in the form of quiet, loving souls that did no harm and loved all? But hey, what did I know? I had dithered with joining the order for the better part of 10 years. I wanted to be a nun, but for some reason that calling had never come. And I had sat with Mother Bernadine for many hours talking it over, and she had told me to follow my heart, and until my heart was fully given to the Lord, I should not enter the order, but serve as I had done through my charitable works. We all fervently believed that Mother Bernadine was a good and righteous woman. In our hearts, we had already made her a saint. To all of us, she was surely destined for heaven, and heaven would open its gates for her, and the fanfare as she entered would surely resonate across the world. I had reminded myself of that as she lay on her deathbed, clutching my hand, a serene smile on her lips as she awaited the Lord to take her home. I was crying, and she had told me not to weep, because she was going to a better place. Into your hands I commit my spirit. She had whispered her last words, and I had watched the light, that bright light, fade from her eyes, and I knew she had carried that light with her, and I wished it was still here with us. And then she was gone. I had wept for a while, and then Mother Gertrude had gently ushered me out of the room. I was in a daze as I went to the chapel, prayed for her soul, lit a candle in her memory, and then went home with a heavy heart. I lay awake most of that night, tossing and turning, ruminating. Ever so often I would glance at the clock on my bedside table, then stare back at the ceiling, watching the lights from the traffic go by. I had felt the cold first, and I pulled the blankets closer around me as a gust of wind whipped through my room. The open pages of my Bible fluttered. I caught the flicker of a movement at the foot of my bed. I glanced down, and there was a figure standing there, looking at me, dressed in a black habit. I watched, transfixed, as it rocked backwards and forwards, moaning softly to itself. How long have I been here? 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 The figure whispered. I sat bolt upright in my bed. I knew who it was. I knew her so well. My heart skipped a beat, and my mind stuttered and faltered. How long? It said again. There was no light in her eyes. They were dead and filled with an anguish and pain. She was deathly white. I felt a shiver of horror and dread down my spine as the apparition held out its hand imploringly. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I began to shiver uncontrollably as she held out her other hand to me, her face twisted in pain and torment. How long
How long?
she wailed. I clutched my blanket tightly around me and whispered, 7 hours. She began to wail louder and tears streamed down her hollow cheeks as she began to fade. Mother, where are you? I had cried out, but in my heart I knew she was not where she was supposed to be, not where we all believed she should be.
An eternity,
she moaned.
It feels as if it's an eternity.
Her face contorting as her tears turned to blood. I recoiled and watched as the tears splattered onto her habit. Where are you? I insisted. I need to know.
Purgatory.
And she was gone. I sat there shaking in a stupor. I must have misheard her. That wasn't right. This holy, this righteous woman, who would surely sit on the right-hand side of Christ, with all his angels, their voices raised in salutation as another saint returned home. In the following weeks my faith faltered, and I turned to my Bible for answers. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt. Trying desperately to shore up my faith, lest I lose my soul. Blown and tossed by the wind. For God so loved the world that he gave his only. The more I read, the more hopeless I felt. I questioned everything, and most of all myself. Was it right to do good only for the ultimate reward? The promise of eternal life. Did that really make us worthy? When only fear of punishment prevented us from doing wrong? What sin had she committed that had barred her from heaven? Wicked enough to banish her to purgatory, yet not heinous enough for hell. Just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. In due course it was announced that Mother Bernardine would be considered for sainthood, a long and arduous process. They would begin by examining every aspect of her life, to ensure that the applicant had been sufficiently holy and virtuous. They would question those close to her, and I was to be one of them. To be considered for sainthood, it was implied that the person was now in heaven. But I knew different. Should I lie or tell the truth? That it was unlikely any of us were going to heaven? Well, not immediately anyway. Perhaps Father Patrick was right, and it was the devil trying to derail the beautification of a most holy and devout servant of God. And yet I must know that in his infinite wisdom, Christ saw more than we did, truly knew her heart, and that was not necessarily my fate, and yet I trembled with a profound dread every time I recalled her words, the pain and anguish in her voice. One drop of blood left behind on my carpet, a constant reminder that maybe none of us were good enough and never would be. I was distraught, almost out of my mind, plagued by a dread that sometimes would make me shake. At times a fever would overcome me as if I had contracted some deathly malady, and I would tremble for days on end. 7 hours here, an eternity there. I am afraid.